Most people try to fix purpose in seasons of uncertainty at the surface, and that is exactly why they stay stuck. Most people assume purpose in seasons of uncertainty begins with a dramatic breakthrough, but durable change usually begins with a quieter question. What standard are you willing to live by on an ordinary day? If your definition only works when you feel inspired, have extra time, or want to impress other people, it is not a standard yet. It is a mood with good branding. A useful long-form conversation has to start there, because anything built on temporary emotion will collapse the moment life becomes inconvenient. At the surface, purpose in seasons of uncertainty sounds obvious, yet people usually shrink it into image, intensity, or short bursts of willpower. They confuse wanting a different life with building the conditions that support a different response. That confusion matters because it makes them evaluate progress by emotion instead of evidence. When the feeling fades, they assume the commitment was fake, even though the real issue is that nothing structural changed. They kept the same schedule, the same friction, the same environment, and expected a new identity to emerge on command. The deeper issue is that purpose in seasons of uncertainty is usually lost long before the visible failure appears. It slips in through small exceptions, private excuses, and tiny negotiations that seem harmless in the moment. You tell yourself this delay does not count. This shortcut is justified. This week is unusual. One compromise rarely looks dangerous, but a pattern of compromise quietly retrains your standards. By the time the bigger breakdown shows up, the real damage has already happened in the invisible decisions that felt too small to matter. That is why naming the pattern clearly matters so much. If you only react to the visible mistake, you keep treating symptoms while the underlying structure stays intact. But when you can say exactly how purpose in seasons of uncertainty erodes in your own life, you gain leverage. You stop speaking in vague, moralizing language and start identifying where your systems are weak, where your defaults invite drift, and where your standards become negotiable. Clarity does not solve everything, but it turns a blurry frustration into a practical design problem you can actually work on. From there, the work becomes less emotional and more architectural. Instead of asking how to feel more purpose in seasons of uncertainty, ask what has to change in your calendar, your environment, and your daily rules so the right choice becomes easier to repeat. This is the moment many people resist because it sounds unglamorous. Yet real progress often looks like reducing friction, narrowing options, setting visible standards, and building a rhythm that protects your attention before the day starts making decisions for you. That is how conviction becomes practice instead of performance. Consider someone who keeps promising change every Sunday night, but enters Monday with the same scattered routine, the same digital noise, and the same lack of boundaries. Their intention may be sincere, but sincerity alone cannot carry a weak structure. They interpret every relapse as a character flaw, when part of the problem is that their environment keeps rewarding the old behavior. In a case like that, the conversation about purpose in seasons of uncertainty becomes concrete. Not what they wish were true, but which repeated conditions are making the wrong response easier than the right one. The answer is rarely more intensity. It is usually one honest adjustment repeated until trust starts to return. Maybe that means a tighter morning routine, a cleaner work surface, a written rule for what happens when motivation drops, or a smaller commitment that gets completed every day without negotiation. Those actions look modest from the outside, but they have compound value because they rebuild self-respect through proof. You stop asking whether you are the kind of person who can follow through, because your days begin supplying evidence that you can. That is what purpose in seasons of uncertainty looks like in practice. Less theater, more consistency. Fewer declarations, more receipts. It is not about becoming rigid or joyless. It is about making sure your important decisions are not constantly exposed to the weakest version of your impulse control. A strong life is usually built from standards that survive ordinary stress, not from perfect streaks performed under perfect conditions. When you understand that, you stop chasing a personality upgrade and start building a repeatable pattern that can hold under pressure. If there is one takeaway worth keeping, it is this. Your life will keep bending toward the standards you quietly accept, not the ideals you occasionally admire. That is why purpose in seasons of uncertainty has to become visible in your schedule, your boundaries, and your repeated choices. Once your practice tells the truth, motivation becomes helpful but no longer essential. That stability is what lets confidence and self-trust compound instead of resetting every week. You are no longer depending on a feeling to rescue you. You are building a way of living that can carry you forward even when the day feels ordinary. Subscribe for practical wisdom and self-mastery.